Welcome to ReCommerce podcast, where we talk all things circular commerce and ReCommerce. I'm Karri Hiekkanen, and I'm here at the Twice headquarters at Helsinki, Finland. And I'm joined today by Tuomo Laine, who is the co-founder and CEO of Twice Commerce. First of all, can you maybe introduce yourself and your company a little bit?
Sure, yeah. Well, repeating what you just said there, I'm Tuomo, I'm one of the founders here at Twice and the CEO. Maybe on my background, I have a background on tech and design, so even though I'm being the CEO, I should know something about products and service design also. And Twice Commerce, we're a commerce platform specially designed for ReCommerce, so our goal is to make it as easy as possible for you to make money and revenue out of selling unique items. So whether it's rentals, so renting those items, or whether it's selling, for example, refurbished or resale goods. So that's where we focus our efforts in making commerce software that acknowledges and makes it that super easy.
All right. Sounds good. And good that you already mentioned the word ReCommerce, which is also on the title of this podcast. But as this is the first episode, I think it's good to maybe start from the top. So what is ReCommerce?
It's an excellent question. And I think there's probably many definitions for that. To me, ReCommerce is anything where I'm selling an item that is unique in its condition or a price point, for example, and whether I'm selling or as it is, or maybe renting it, so selling it as a service. But the idea is that an item gets more sales cycles than one. So you sell it twice or more, kind of where our name is also coming from. But I think historically ReCommerce was attached more to refurbished sales and all of that. So, but when we talk about ReCommerce, we include subscriptions and rentals and resales and refurb sales and buyback, everything that has to do with the idea of making money out of selling goods more than once.
Okay. And do you know where the RE actually comes from on the word ReCommerce?
Well, I think repeat. I think RE, it could, like my brain goes immediately like recycle and read everything. But if you know the actual answer, I'm more than happy to learn it.
I had a short discussion with AI overlords today, and they said that it's reverse commerce. So
okay, so it's kind of more from the reverse logistics side of things. That I think it has to do with also the historical background then, that it's quite affiliated with refurb and resales. That kind of, yeah.
But yeah, maybe can you give me a little, like a short comparison between like ReCommerce or overall circular business models versus like traditional or linear business models?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways how we could kind of go about it, but I usually like to start with the idea that in linear commerce, kind of your operational model is to manufacture or buy cheap and sell it out a bit more expensive. And that's pretty much it. And then you repeat that cycle and you take that cross margin in between, and with that you finance your operations and hopefully pocket some of that as profit. I think with ReCommerce, the idea starts more from the aspect that in your inventory or in your balance sheets and assets, you have items that you look to monetize more than once. So maybe it's in historically in markets where it's super valuable, you might have been leasing it out or similar. So you kind of start to optimize the lifetime value of the item rather than that one sale. So when you engage in that kind of model, I think the first understandable thing that happens is that in your inventory or balance sheet, you don't anymore have new items that are comparable to each other. So you don't have any like 1,000 iPhone 15s that are all comparable to each other and that you could categorize under one SKU, for example. Rather, you have 1,000 unique items that have been used in a unique amount, or they have a unique condition or unique price points, and you can go extremely into granularity there. But that starts to be the main difference. So all of a sudden you kind of have to start tracking your inventory in individual item level and understand what has happened to that and what will happen in the future. So that's really kind of the main starting point. And then that then reflects into multiple touch points of commerce. So if you are thinking about online purchasing, so storefronts, all of a sudden your customers need to be able to browse a catalog that is reflecting this kind of a unique item base. So things on that front become a little bit more complex. Order fulfillment becomes a bit more complex. It's not anymore enough that you have a person going about your warehouse or storage trying to find one of the 1,000 iPhones because they're all equivalent. You might actually need to find the exact one. So it's this kind of things that then starts to trickle down in all of the supply chain, all of your inventory management, all of your catalog management, all the way to storefront end user experiences, and then like things like reverse logistics and so on. So I think that's the main differences, kind of on a high level. But it's I think the most sobering way is to just start it from the inventory and think about that. How does your business change as the kind of nature of your assets change?
Maybe also a quick word about like the different business models. So I think like in linear business, it's pretty simple that you buy cheap, sell more expensive, and that's where you get the profit. But in circular commerce, ReCommerce, there are like multiple ways to actually monetize the inventory. So maybe a couple words about the different models and.
Yeah. I would again do like a first hard split, going about whether you're still selling stuff or whether you're servitizing the item. So in the selling side of things, it's business models like refurbished sales or then secondhand sales as it is. So there you are making your profits out of the idea that, well, you had to get that item in from somewhere in the first place. Maybe it was a product return after the initial kind of virgin sale, or maybe you bought it from an aftermarket and then you feel that you can find an arbitrage in that value that you bought it from, and then you can repair it, so refurbish it and sell it for a little bit more of a profit there. Or maybe it's just secondhand that you're kind of maybe aggregating certain amount of certain style of clothes, and then as a marketplace you can find customers that way. So these are the models where you still sell, and I think the challenge is then on the supply side on figuring out where do you find this secondhand or supply where you can make your margin. Now the servitization side then includes things like rentals and whether it's fixed short-term rentals or whether it's long-term leasing or whether it's subscriptions and such, where the idea is that the item itself is part of a service. So you're not buying an iPhone, you're buying a phone as a service, and then you pay a recurring fee for it, but usually attached to that you get some other benefits like free repairs or maybe some other service bundles. Like leasing car companies make most of their money, I think, from maintenance and these additional services. So these are, I think, the different models. So either you servitize the good as part of as a service, or then you keep kind of doing these unit sales, but then you're trying to just figure out where do you get your supply. And there's different aspects related to both that make them interesting and challenging. Just as one thing with the sales side, it's the kind of speed in which you can flip your inventory. That kind of defines how much capital you have tied in the business. Whereas in the service side, you usually have to, your kind of balance sheet starts to grow because you hold these assets in your own balance sheet for a longer time. It might take longer time for them to pay themselves back. So there's this lead time until that item becomes profitable, and usually you need to figure out financing for it.
Very nice way to separate those two models. Then I want to move into like this hypothetical situation. Like if I'm a new entrepreneur, I'm starting a new business, why should I go to ReCommerce or like linear, or I guess in your case you're probably advocating more on the ReCommerce side, but why choose that?
Yeah, actually I would say that I don't advocate either or. I just say that if you go linear, you should be looking after the goods that you sell out. There's an opportunity to make more money out of those. So in re-commerce, it's always a question of where do you get the supply and how do you finance it. So maybe if you start as a new entrepreneur, I think there's usually a correlation that you're super enthusiastic about a certain product category, for example, bikes or cameras or similar. So you know that category super well. So you know how you might be able to repair these things, or you have some kind of a niche understanding that you feel that you can commercialize. So there's information asymmetry which allows you to maybe secure supply from an aftermarket. So that might be, and it might be cheaper to get into that. It's cheaper to buy a used kind of vinyl than a new one, and maybe you can make a kind of a margin on it. Or then on the service side, if you know, for example, what kind of experiences people want to have with e-biking in a forest, you're putting a lot of that value into that experience delivery, and then the bike is just there to kind of facilitate the delivery of the thing. So I think that would be the reasons to go there. But even though you would just go linear and buy new stuff and sell it out, I think you should have this thought in your head that, hey, I just bought something quite expensive. I sold it out. I know that there is this second-hand supply there. I can, from day zero, establish a relationship with this customer saying that if there ever is a time that you don't need this anymore, you want to upgrade it or whatever, just bring it to me. There's even regulation pushing like merchants in the European Union, at least, towards this kind of a behavior. But it's good business kind of taking those back. And in some cases, you can get it back for free. And that's a valuable asset usually in some level. So that's like even though you would go linear, I would kind of think about the value of those assets that you put out there, and could you secure them back with some kind of a cheap method.
I guess one issue that might arise with that is if you are, for example, established linear in linear commerce and you've been doing that business for a while, then when you actually start receiving like used items, it's like, what do I do with those? What kind of operations do I have to have there? Do I outsource it and so on? Which some might argue that it's kind of like a focus out of the main business of like selling, but
yeah, some are afraid like whether it's cannibalizing or whatever, but it's true that probably if you're an established retailer, you don't spin up a trade-in program overnight. You kind of have to think about that. If you put that value proposition out there, that you're allowed to bring your old, goods back to us, are you capable of actually handling that inflow of goods? So there are things like, is this really a good that you need to inspect and identify those? And gladly there are multiple of solutions in the market to help you out there. But then I think this probably then goes to like market timing. Why would you start to think about these things now, or why most of the large retailers are somehow thinking about it, having proof of concepts going on or projects around it? Has to do with the fact that due to sustainability and circular kind of pressure to go towards a circular economy for all of the good reasons, it's kind of turning from an opportunity to a must. That if you don't start to do something about it, it's in a years or a few years of time, it's going to start to become a cost for it, because the world is, at least in most places, going to a place where if you sell something, you have the responsibility of what happens to it during its life cycle. So, and I think there's industries like small home, like electronics and home appliances, where in most European countries, as a consumer, you have the right to just bring it back to the store where you bought it once it gets broken, and it's their responsibility to recycle it. So the recycling pressure is kind of moving back towards the sellers rather than the buyers. So in that world, it's maybe a bit better to be in a position where you have this thing figured out.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good segue to my next topic, which is focusing on what type of tailwinds do you see at the moment that is kind of driving into the ReCommerce?
I think there's the usual suspects like, consumer behavior. So most researchers list that, for example, Gen Z wants to buy more sustainable products. and kind of repair capable products and all of that. So there's this consumer preferences. Also, there are things like regulational pressure. So in European Union, like digital product passport, right to repair. There's this kind of pressure going on as a kind of a tailwind, depending on how tailwind for maybe re-commerce providers like us. Maybe someone in the more mainstream linear side of things might see it as a headwind. But then I think there's this like, I like to also think about just like brutal financial things that to me in the current economy and the global kind of economy, it seems that manufacturing costs are going up in many cases. Manufacturing might be moving closer to the end market in some categories. Usually this means also that the manufacturing is moving to a more expensive labor market. So these are all kind of market movements that increase the cost of manufacturing or kind of the sales side of things, which means that the margins are getting squeezed unless you can move that price to the consumer. Now then, looking at the consumer purchasing power, the world doesn't seem to be going to a place where the income diversity would be kind of incomes would be going to a better place. So the purchasing power of consumers seem to be not growing as fast as the cost of supplying, which would indicate that with the traditional model, you need to sell more in order to secure enough gross margin to finance your operation or growth targets. But at the same time, this manufacturing more move is becoming, it's kind of the cycle, it doesn't anymore work, that let's go somewhere and manufacture more cheaper, which then gets you to a place where, okay, so how can we improve the margin? And then you start to look into things like, I need to sell this one item more than once, so twice or more. So then you go into these re-commerce models and try to pick the one that fits your product category and your kind of end customer profile the best. And then in most cases end up in a world where you would make more profit over long term, but it is a disruptive paradigm in the market and you need to invest a bit in order to get there.
So in a way, it's also re-commerce can be considered a tool to kind of fight the inflation of.
Yes, yeah, I would say so, and usually like I like to think that if there's big market disruptions, it can't only be good. So if we go to the like far end of one scenario, let's imagine a world where everything's servitized, so you don't own anything. I think, was it World Trade Organization or someone kind of put out this statement a while back that by 2030 you don't own anything and you're gonna be happy, which is a little bit of a controversial statement maybe the you're gonna be happy statement. So there is, of course, that if everything's servitized, it kind of means that you're living in this subscription economy. So your access to goods and quality is dependent on your net income. So how much you can pay out of those subscriptions, and if you have a situation where that net income takes a hit, all of a sudden, you know, your beds and chairs and fridges start to disappear from your home, and that's probably not ideal. So maybe it's a question of basic income or whatever models there might be, or maybe we don't go full subscription economy. Maybe there are still category of goods that you want to hold on to at least, or have the right to own it if you want it. So
I think the white T-shirt is the famous example of like you probably don't want anybody's white T-shirt.
Yeah, you're probably like there's no business in renting white T-shirts, but even for that, I think we usually say that there's no business in renting white T-shirt, but there might be a business in remanufacturing a kind of white T-shirt. So when you get those old T-shirts back, maybe you can turn those into fiber and remanufacture that T-shirt. So you save a little bit on the material costs at scale, hopefully.
Maybe quick word also about any possible headwinds that are slowing down the re-commerce.
There are a lot of headwinds. Like I think these headwinds are such that it's exactly correct to say that it slows it down. It probably won't prevent it. Figuring out financing is one. If you go servitization in the servitization model, someone needs to finance those goods. That can be hard, especially for micro merchants. They probably need some kind of aggregate provider there. The other one is the fact that it is not only some kind of a storefront end user innovation, it is an actual operational innovation in material flows and so on. So, that has to do with both operation and software infrastructure that needs to be built. So, for that item to be able to come back and go to an inventory from which it can be sold, there are things like reverse logistics or this kind of refurbishment inspection at minimum that needs to be done, and that is either a human process or then a specialized machine that needs to be invested into. And also the whole commerce software layer, which is kind of our focus area as a company, needs to be rebuilt or extended. So as a maybe simplified example, if all of the world's point of sales is missing the buttons to press when a customer comes back to, I don't know, H&M and gives you those old white t-shirts, if the employees at the store do not have a button to press that, okay, I just received 20 white t-shirts, that would trigger a bunch of stuff in ERPs and the supply chain, it can't really scale. So we had 20 years or whatever in e-commerce innovation or more, 30 companies like Shopify, Amazon, and everyone building commerce infrastructure. And it's a similar effort that we need to do for circularity, and maybe we can just do it in 10 rather than 20. But yeah, so I think those are the headwinds. There are some true headwinds, but it's probably non-debatable that it's going to happen over some period of time. So it's a market timing thing. Great for venture capital and all of the other market timing speculative things.
Maybe as a final question is, what is your prediction, or where do you see that the whole ReCommerce space and circular business model, where is it going to be in 5 years? Is it going to be in a substantially better place, or is there more adoption, or how do you see it?
Well, at least the market is saying that ReCommerce is growing faster than commerce or e-commerce in general. That would mean that it is in a lot bigger place. I kind of feel that there are certain product categories that will probably be more mature in this change. So maybe the white t-shirts aren't the first ones. I don't know. Anytime you put a prediction, it's the best way of making sure that that doesn't happen. But there are, of course, like phones where this is already a mature market. You have companies like Swappy and others making a good business out of it. So yeah, I think that kind of probably the resales and refurb market is the fastest growing one for various categories. Servitization side of things like rentals are then more geared probably to sporting goods or power tool, like do-it-yourself markets and cars, and I think those will kind of popularize there. Probably bigger shift is then driven also by the manufacturers, that how much they start to design their products for ReCommerce. So the composability and repairability of those. So I would say that, yeah, it's going to be a great market in 5 years of time. Maybe that's where I'm going to. That's as close of a prediction that I feel comfortable making.
All right. That's it for this time. So thank you a lot for your time, Tuomo, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon again.
Thank you so much.